were on the set of The Insider there, was it 98, 99? And is it true you went to Michael Mann and said Ridley Scott had come to you and to talk to you about this movie Gladiator, and was Michael Mann who was actually the one to advise you to take it because Ridley Scott was in the top 3% shooters of all time in his opinion?
Yeah, that's what he said actually, yeah.
Really, at that time, was that what it was? Like, were you having doubts at the time about?
No, there wasn't that I
I
had doubts, but I had seen 1492, and you know, I'd realised there was a couple of core decisions in there. One of which was like, it's not a really good idea having a central character who you can't understand, and it's Gerard Depardieu as Christopher Columbus. But you know, I was very close to Michael at the time, and I had a really good relationship with him. And I'd been intrigued enough to actually take a meeting with Ridley based on one sentence said to me by the producer. He said, it's 184 AD, you're a Roman general, you're being directed by Ridley Scott, would you like to have a conversation about it? So I had, you know, entered into that, but the script wasn't there. And so what Michael was really pointing out, that Ridley was known for his collaborative perspective, you know, so not to be afraid of it. You're not going to be bulldozed into doing something that's bullshit. You know, Ridley, if he's going into that, is going to go way beyond any of the cliches of, you know, previous Roman movies and try and find something really special. So, you know, I took Michael's opinion and spent a bit more time with Ridley, and you know, it was a long and arduous process on that film, getting to a narrative that was truthful to some degree, you know, and we had to cut through various writers' ideas, like, you know, that certain gladiators did endorsement deals with certain olive oil makers, or that there was, you know, a Ferrari version of chariots, and you know, your character would only drive the top level chariot. And I was like, I don't think anybody wants to know that, but you know, once the two of us had spent a bit of time here in London, actually, in the middle of a winter, meeting at his office in Ben Street, right, and just, you know, slashing at the things that we didn't like, we came down to 21 pages. And so we started a $103 million movie with 21 pages and probably a large degree of self-confidence which wasn't warranted. And we went from there. And that's pretty much the way we approach every movie we make.
But Romper Stomper was the one, obviously, where you really arrived. People really started to take notice. And then you followed that up a few years later with LA Confidential. They kind of announced you that you were on the scene, but would you say that was The Insider and it was Gladiator that really kind of propelled you onto that A-list, and with the Oscar nomination and then the Oscar, of course?
Life was a lot simpler
before then.
Before Gladiator, yeah. I'd done enough work where, you know, your sort of face was recognisable, but then when LA Confidential came along and it became one of those movies that everybody talked about, you have to see it, you know. With The Insider came an Academy Award nomination and a number of other awards around the world. So that brought a sort of certain credibility, you know, factor as well. So that was a kind of a cool little slice of time where I could talk to anybody I wanted to talk to. I could go anywhere I wanted without actually necessarily being in that zeitgeist thing where, you know, people immediately recognize you as more like, oh, I know
You've
that
got
bloke's
options.
face, you know, you know. So yeah, that was a nice 4 or 5 months, you know, where fame was comfortable.
Yeah.
And then after that, it became a different thing where, you know, if you didn't answer a question, people just answer it for you, and you become this other thing, and that, you know, that was a bit confronting.
Okay. And The Insider, I have to say, is actually probably one of my favourite films. I think it's an absolutely brilliant film. But even with the likes of The Insider and with the likes of State of Play, this, Gladiator, these are all films that they're timeless in a sense because they could have been made at any point in the last 30-odd years, in that they're very old-fashioned stories and they're told in a specific character-driven way. Is that obviously what it draws you to these projects? There's no CGI, there's no massive amounts of CGI. No, you can make it without it.
A guy said to me the other day, sort of, you know, like the number one go-to Hollywood screenwriter at the moment. He said the thing that his peers talk about is that my movies are narratively sophisticated, so the writers understand that I care about writing, you know, and that was a kind of a cool compliment, you know, because I do. I care about what the story is, you know, and I'm not into the comic book stuff and the superhero things and just blowing something up for the sake of blowing up. You take me into the cinema, I'm not going to be satisfied unless you want to tell me a story. But it's the same way that I listen to music as well. If you're just waffling on about some bullshit against a beat, I'm not that keen on it, man. I want to hear the human experience of what the singer has to say. And the same way I want to hear or experience the same human perspective from a filmmaker.
You feel like films are going to be studied, it's going to be timeless, as opposed to it's going to open big in the weekend and people are going to forget about it then?
Well, I can answer that by saying that there isn't a single movie that I've made that I cannot tell you my singular and serious motivations for doing. And I don't have any regrets of any of the films that I've done, and I understand why I did them, whether they were commercially successful or not. And I can defend that perspective. And I'm not in a very big group of actors when it comes to being able to say that.
Okay. Blessed.
Very lucky.
Very lucky.
Blessed, for sure. But I've been making decisions based on a certain quality control from the time I was a young man. And, it's not about bucks. It's never been about the dollar. It's been about, what I get to experience as an actor and the story that we're about to tell.
Okay, Russell, appreciate you taking the time to speak to me, sir.
Cheers,
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, man.